Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you and welcome for joining our PMI Montgomery County chapter lunch and learn for the month of April. We know it's towards the end of the month, but we appreciate everyone being on, and welcome to all our attendees, both members and guests who are accessing this on demand via our chapter YouTube channel. Not sure about you, but April flew by for us. It feels like we were just together at the restaurant and on the simulcast, which was 4 weeks ago now, just a few days ago. So hopefully everyone had a productive month. Okay, our next chapter meeting will be next Wednesday, or 2 Wednesdays from now, May 7th. We're happy to announce Miss Amy DeRay, who's with the program management team with the Maryland Department of Commerce. We've heard your feedback on surveys that we've had a lot of federal government, but not a lot of state and local. So we're adapting to that to put that into our program year calendar. So she'll be presenting on the project manager's view from the Maryland Department of Commerce. We know what the Department of Commerce does for the country from a federal level, but in terms of the state, I think it'll be an interesting and enlightening session for everyone. So that'll be at our normal location of That's Amore Restaurant, and same price, and that'll fall in the business acumen PDU category. Okay, our next chapter lunch and learn will be next Friday. Our featured speaker will be myself. This is will be focused on PMI Infinity, which is PMI's Gen AI model. It is powered by OpenAI, which is the ChatGPT solution, but it's bringing in all the PMI library as well as specialized project management solutions and calculations. So we'll be diving into that, as well as more focused on when to use all the different AI offerings that we have. Like, when is it better to use PMI Infinity than OpenAI or Copilot, or maybe even detailed solutions that you have in your professional workspace. So we'll go into that. So that should be a good presentation, and that'll be next Friday, as well as being available on demand. All PMI members, if you have a PMI login, you can access PMI Infinity. You don't have to have PMI certification or anything of that nature. Before we announce our distinguished speaker, a few logistical items today. So we will be recording this, or we're recording this now for our chapter YouTube channel. Mr. Cheng will make a subset of the slides available as well, accessible. If you have a question, feel free to put it in chat or raise your hand, and we'll take that live. And if there are any technical difficulties, just hop back in, but I think this should be a seamless session. Okay, we're honored to have Mr. Richard Cheng, who has a surplus of active certifications. As we all know, with our own certifications, they come at a price, so there's an investment in that. But any professional holding 10 or more certifications impresses me. He's the founder of Agility Prime Solutions, one of the premier training offers in the world. He's speaking for Scrum Alliance next month at an international summit. He's already briefed one PMI chapter earlier this week on another topic out of his portfolio of expertise. And even more impressive to me, he's also a Mensa member. So for those familiar with Mensa and the premier IQ association of the world. So without further ado, we'll turn it over to Mr. Cheng. The topic today is going to be more in terms of Agile practice lessons learned. We'll get into different frameworks, being a federal government program manager myself, I've seen different ways of doing agile. One that he'll go into today is the less framework, so more that non-dedicated teams and just a single backlog and working prioritizations versus dedicated team structure, and which is better, and how we as program managers, project managers can manage our agile efforts in a way that even though things may not be at the velocity from a user story and product backlog items that we need, can right the ship quickly and not necessarily need to change your whole approach. So we'll turn it over to Mr. Cheng. Welcome, sir.
Great. Thank you a lot, Matthew. I appreciate the introductions and the kind words. I also appreciate you having me for this talk. Let me go ahead and share my slides. Let me do that. Give me one moment, please. All right, here we go. Oh, by the way, Matthew, I emailed you a copy of the slides, so you should have access to those, and I assume they'll be available at on the website.
Yes, sir.
Great, that's perfect. Awesome. So welcome, everyone. So today we're going to talk about scaling agile teams. Basically, the concept we'll talk about today is how to effectively manage your efforts if you have multiple agile teams that have to work together. So let me start with a bit of a question. So I want you to think about this. Think about the experiences you've had when you have multiple teams working together in agile environments specifically, but even outside agile environments. What have you seen work out well? What have you seen been some of the biggest issues in terms of having multiple teams work together? So think about that for just a moment. And if you want to share, feel free to type some notes in the chat, or you can say something verbally. But go ahead and share any thoughts you have. What have you seen work out well? What have you seen work out not so well when you have multiple teams that have to work and coordinate together? Go ahead and let's get some of your thoughts out there, either in the chat or out loud. Let me know what you think. I'll give you folks a moment or two to think about that. All right, anybody want to speak up? Anyone want to chime in? Well, some investments in team building. So there, oh, I like that. Amelia, walk us through what you just wrote, Amelia.
Sure. So I think it's nice to spend a little bit of time and invest in having the teams get to know each other if they don't already. I think it tends to make people, assume good intention and work together a little more smoothly.
Yeah, I like that a lot, Amelia. You know, what we see in organizations sometimes, it's us and them, right? It's us and them. You're always letting us down. We can't trust anything you say. None of your estimates are accurate. And so getting to know each other, it helps transform us from an us and them into more of a we. We're going to do this together. We're going to partner on this. Let's work together on this. So I like that a lot. That's a nice one. And then walk us through that issue you had.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking, oftentimes we're not working in an ideal world. There's not enough resources or time or whatever to go around. And, everyone wants their team to succeed. You want to accomplish your goals on time. So when there's limited resources, whether that is, budget or the client's time, sometimes that leads to butting heads.
Yeah, it's a great point, right? Let's say, well, I'll even give you a practical example at the team level. Let's say we're building software and let's say we need to build the front end, but let's say that we have one UI UX designer shared across 4 different teams. That gets challenging because, anytime that UI UX designer is spending on my team means that they can't service another team, and that gets tricky as well. Excellent points. Amanda, walk us through what you just wrote.
From the teams I've been a part of, most of the time when they have to work together, there's often like a high pressure deliverable associated with it. And when the teams have perceived competing priorities, I think that can be particularly challenging. But truly at the heart of it, like most of these people like genuinely want to work together and learn from each other, especially if they don't get to interact very often. So I think the intent is there, but priorities or perception around them can make it challenging.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Oh, by the way, Amanda, were you in my session earlier this week?
Yes, I was, and I'm not a
Welcome
part of
back.
this chapter, so I'd like to thank this chapter for allowing me to join.
Yes, yeah, I did a talk for the PMI North Carolina group on Wednesday on retrospectives, and now so welcome back, and thank you, PMI Montgomery County as well for having me today. But your point's very good, and actually I've seen this before, where the problem is you have competing departments, different competing priorities in different departments sometimes can be tricky. If I use a very silly example, imagine we're building Microsoft Word, right? And so we might have an executive whose department's in charge of spell check. We might have another executive whose department's in charge of Clippy, and let's say they both have a $15,000 bonus tied to their initiatives. Well, when we release the first version of Microsoft Word, we just can't put Clippy in front of spell check. We just can't, right? And so you're going to be upsetting one of those departments, and that can be very challenging to manage from a product standpoint. Yeah, so those competing priorities sometimes can be tricky, especially when you have stakeholders whose goals don't align. That can be very tricky as well. Yeah. Matthew, walk us through what you just wrote.
Sure. It said interpretation of requirements and prioritization. So I think right now, user stories, product backlog items, like there's not that gold standard for how they should be written. So some are more detailed than others. And then what does really that minimal viable product mean? And the more teams you have working together, the more that can get lost in messaging and interpretation.
Yeah, it's an excellent point, right? The danger is, if two teams have to work on something, we kind of work off similar requirements. One of the dangers, like you point out, is we read it differently. Oh, that's the way you read it. I read it a totally different way. Also, depending how we prioritize things, maybe I'm ready to integrate now. Your team isn't ready to integrate with me for another 2 months, and that's going to cause an issue. Those are all great points. Yeah. Pam, what about you? What did you have to say here?
Hi. So, I've been in teams where there's lack of collaboration and cooperation, and, that does not work well. It's best. And then, teams that are just working towards their best interests instead of looking at the project from a holistic standpoint and working with the other teams and applying their expertise and explaining their reasons for having things done a certain way. At least it would help the other teams understand where they're coming from and their perspective.
Yeah, it's a great point, right? What works well is if I can do my part while understanding how it relates to the big picture, that tends to work well. But if I just do my part without understanding how it relates to the big picture, the danger is that by not understanding big picture, I don't do my part in a way that's best for the big picture is the problem. Those are very good points, Pam. And Adam, we'll do one more from Adam. Adam, what do you think?
Yeah, one of the issues I've come across is more on the administrative part of teams. It's story point estimation, where one team uses the exponential scale, 2, 4, 8, 16, and so forth. And another one uses arithmetic scale. So trying to estimate that, they kind of go, we don't know how to deal with that part. Also, dealing with different points of documentation and locations of that has become a challenge.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And one of the things that we'll talk about in this session is, how do I share learnings? How do I create standards? How do I create consistency across all these teams? How do I make it so that if team 1 does something, we're not reinventing the wheel on team 3? Are all very good points. We're actually going to talk about that in this session. Yeah, a lot of great points for everyone. And this is going to help drive a lot of the kind of thoughts and conversations in this talk. And so let me get into some of these details. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your perspectives. Before I start, let me just introduce myself very quickly. My name is Richard Cheng. I'm an Agile trainer and coach. I live here in Reston, Virginia. Although I actually worked for many years up in Maryland. I used to work for a consulting company up there. And then I was an employee for many, many years at the NASDAQ stock market. So if you're familiar with where Shady Grove Hospital is, our office was right next to Shady Grove Hospital. And we also have a big center at the big data center on Key West Avenue and near the Rio Center as well. So I'm quite familiar with the Montgomery County area. In fact, shout out to my aunt. So my aunt has a restaurant in Rockville. Free plug for my aunt. Taipei Tokyo Cafe is my aunt's restaurant in Rockville. Go visit her. Tell her I said hello. Now, if you tell her you know me, it's kind of 50-50. There's a chance she might give you a discount, but sometimes I get on her nerves and there's a chance she might charge you extra. So good luck. But the restaurant's great and I highly recommend it. Rockville, Virginia.
And that's right in that Falls Grove shopping center, correct?
Well, so the one that's by the Krispy Kreme in Falls Grove, she sold that one. So that's no longer there, but she has another one closer to that White Flint area.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Great stuff. Uh, so what's your aunt's baby name for you? So when I was a kid, they used to call me Hong Hong. So Hong Hong is the childhood nickname growing up in the family. Um, let's see. My fun, interesting, and boring fact is I have 3 passports. I was born in Taiwan. I have my Taiwanese passport. We later immigrated to Canada. I became Canadian. I have my Canadian passport, and then when I was still young, we immigrated to the U.S. I became an American and have my American passport. Although I will say that the 2 of those 3 passports are way out of date, way expired at this point. And then you have my contact information. So let me go ahead and also give you my contact information in the chat window so you have it handy. In the chat window, you have my LinkedIn. Feel free to join me on LinkedIn. You have my email address. You have my link tree. If you click on my link tree, it gives you access to my website, some of my social media, my calendar, my slide share. I teach all of the Scrum Alliance classes, so feel free to take my classes, CSM, CSPO, Advanced CSM, Advanced CSPO, that whole set. That's enough about me. So let's get into the discussion. So I want to first talk about some of the well-known scaling models and concepts. So probably the most well-known scaling model, the most popular one is SAFe, based on a study from State of the Agile survey by Digital AI. SAFe is the most popular scaling model out there, Scaled Agile Framework. All these scaling models have their pros and cons. So for SAFe, some of the advantages for SAFe is it's enterprise focused. It works well in large organizations. It's very structured, so if you use a lot of structure, there's that. It is, like I said, the most popular model out there, so there's a lot of adoption, and there's a whole ecosystem. You get training, there's a lot of tools, and so those are some of the advantages. However, I've been in SAFe environments before. I think the sweet spot for SAFe is if you have a team that's very mature from an agile understanding standpoint, and they deliver very well at the team level in both Scrum and Kanban. From there, I think SAFe can work very well to kind of organize it into the enterprise. But I think for teams, organizations just starting out their agile journey, I think SAFe may be a little too much. The downsides people often talk about is that it can be heavy. And the dangers, if you're not familiar with some of these concepts, the dangers you kind of can be collapsed by the heft. The picture itself, as you can see, is a bit more robust. Dean Leffingwell, the founder of SAFe, would argue that, hey, if there are parts of it you don't need or don't like, feel free to get rid of it and change it. But a lot of organizations don't really do that. And so the problem is that you can collapse under the heft of it is the danger. It can be expensive, a lot of training and tools to kind of get you up to where you need to be. And it can be a bit rigid in its base implementation, meaning if you're going to implement it out of the box from picture, it can be a bit rigid. A lot of pure Agilists are not big fans of SAFe because the 2 biggest issues are that all Agile methods are supposed to expose your dysfunction. And one of the dangers with SAFe is because the picture is so robust, one of the dangers is it can hide your dysfunction. And so a lot of organizations will make changes in the pictures, but they don't really change the culture you need to change to adopt it. And the other thing is that SAFe for smaller organizations maybe just a bit too much overhead. There's actually a more streamlined version called Essential SAFe that takes that's a bit more streamlined. So if you think about starting off with SAFe, the Essential SAFe I would recommend you start with. But with that said, SAFe is very valid. And like I said, the sweet spot for me is if you have an organization that understands Agile very well and can deliver effectively at the team levels, then I think SAFe in that environment may be very good. In fact, in the chat window, type in yes if you've experienced working with SAFe environments before. Anyone here had worked in SAFe environment before? It is somewhat popular here with some of our government clients in the DC area, so we do see it now and again. Oh, and I do have a SAFe certification, but that is also way expired at this point. I'm also a certified LESS practitioner. So LESS is large scale Scrum. You don't see LESS as much in the US. It's actually a bit more popular in Europe. LESS is really taking the Scrum concept and extending it more to the enterprise. And so LESS is designed to be more lightweight. The concept with LESS is that it starts off with less. And so then you add more practices as you need them. So that part of it I like. Some of the advantages is that it's lightweight. Um, if you're doing Scrum really well, it really just is an extension of Scrum. It doesn't require a lot of new layers, so it's a bit more cost effective. And from a less standpoint, it really focuses on root problems, the systems thinking, understanding the complete, for example, delivery end to end. So you're not focused on only certain areas, but you have the big picture. But some of the biggest issues with less is that out of the box, it's really designed for up to 8 teams. There's something called less large, which is an extended version, but that gets to be a bit more complex. But my biggest problem with less is that less uses a concept called area product owners. And area product owners can be overlooked anywhere from 4 to 8 teams. I get very concerned when I don't have product owners working directly at the team level, because what I've experienced is if I let the developers kind of take over some of the product ownership activity, there's 2 major things you have to guard against. Number one, developers tend to build things the way they want to use it. However, they're not always the end user. And so that product owner really needs to be in there to help the developers understand, here's who our user base is, here's what they find valuable, here are their problems, here's how they want to use a product. And so one danger is we develop product developers want to use instead of developing a product that our users want to use. The other danger is being a former developer, we tend to sequence and prioritize things based on development efficiencies, which actually is nice for a product owner because I'm going to leverage that to help guide how I prioritize it. But as a product owner, we prioritize it based on value to the users and value to the organization. So for example, if we release the first version of Microsoft Word and there's Clippy and no spell check, well, no one's going to buy it. But the danger is that developers built Clippy first because it was easier to build as they work towards the harder stuff. So the lack of product ownership at the team level, I get concerned about as well. With that said, less isn't horrible, but those are my biggest concerns. Yeah. Oh, here's a question. How do you overcome perception that the requirement owners' work isn't being prioritized enough as they have to share resources? Why don't I have my own team? So that's a good point. We're actually going to see elements of that in the second half of this Matt. Yeah. Now, also, shout outs to the PMI. So the discipline Agile is endorsed by the Project Management Institute. Now, I'm going to admit right now, I am actually certified in less and in safe. I'm not as familiar with disciplined Agile, which is funny because I'm actually friends with Scott Ambler, who's one of the founders of Disciplined Agile. He's a fellow, I'm a former Canadian. He's a current Canadian. He's a Canadian. But I'm not as familiar with Disciplined Agile. In fact, I've been meaning to kind of take a class on it to learn more about it. But in my research, here's what I found. So some of the pros are that you can choose your own way of working philosophy. So it's more adaptable. It supports hybrid approaches. So you can take elements of Agile, Lean, DevOps, traditional, and kind of blend it in. There are some toolkits available. And once again, it is backed by the PMI. The cons from what I've read is that the learning curve can be a bit challenging without the kind of the coaching involved. So there's coaching that helps. Some of it may be a bit less perspective, maybe a bit confusing. And it just, as of now, doesn't have the same footprint as some of the other models do, just because prior to the PMI, the reach of it was a bit more limited in the past. Any questions about any of those 3 formal models? There are other models out there. There's Nexus, there's a Scrum at Scale, there's Flex. I'm not as familiar with those, but these are 3 of the popular ones we see out in the industry. Any questions about these first 3? Now, this isn't really a model. This is how Spotify does their scaling. And so I'm going to put the link in the chat window. We don't have time to watch this video in the class, but this is a great video about how Spotify does their scaling. And it's not really a model, it's just how Spotify does it. But this concept is one that I really love. And so for the teams I've worked with in the past, what I recommend is you kind of build your own initially. So when your teams are first kind of doing Agile at the team level and you want to start scaling out, what I suggest is if you're first starting out and your Agile maturity level is a bit lower, I suggest you're not really ready for any of these formal models. And my recommendation is you kind of create your own as you start. So here's my recommendation, and here's my example. So one of my clients in the past was OPM, Office of Personnel Management. So when I was there years ago, I was a Scrum Master and an Agile coach. One of the programs I worked with there was USA Staffing. USA Staffing is a product that OPM builds and sells to the government that allows government agencies to manage their job hiring and onboarding needs. USA Staffing is not one team. As you can see here, USA Staffing is 5 teams, along with a super product owner at the very top. So the super product owner is in charge of the entire program, the entire product line. That's what we have at the very top. And then what we have here is 5 different Scrum teams. You can see, first of all, you can see all these Scrum teams are made up of super cool people because they named all their teams after spaceships. As a sci-fi fan, I really appreciate that. But what you can see here is each team has their own product owner, each team has their own Scrum Master, each team has their own team members. Now, if you're very astute, what you'll realize if you've taken a CSM class, if you haven't, take mine. I tell a lot of funny jokes in mine. But if you have taken a CSM type course, Certified Scrum Master class, you'll learn there that the Scrum team ideal size is 10 or less. You can see here Endeavor, product owner, Scrum Master, architect, 9 developers, 5 analysts. That's 17. So by Scrum standards, it's quite high. Now, what I've seen is when Scrum teams get above 10 or so, it still kind of works. But as you get closer to 15, closer to 20, what I noticed is when teams get large like this, everything just takes a little bit longer, communication's a little bit harder, everything's just a bit riskier. This picture was taken in 2016. Over the years, they've tweaked and adjusted this formula, but this is what it was when I was there. So what you'll notice here, once again, is we have 5 different Scrum teams. And so the way this whole thing is set up is we really try to minimize dependencies and handoffs across teams. So each team has their own team members, each team has their own Scrum Master, each team has their own product owner. We really want to minimize and remove dependencies and handoffs. You can't get rid of all your dependencies, but we want to minimize them. So what we have here on the support team, that's a bit of a misnomer. That's not really a team. Think of this as like a mishmash of odds and ends, but that's our support system. And there are some shared services. So shared services include stuff like communications lead, database administrators, sysadmin, 508 lead, security lead, deployment team. Those are all services shared across all the teams. But see where it says test coordinator, testing support, automated testing? They're not doing testing for the team. Each team does their own testing at the team level. They're providing the test infrastructure. This whole thing is architected and designed to really reduce dependencies as much as possible. In fact, let me draw this out for you. So what they have at the very top here is what they call a super product owner. At Spotify, they call it a chief product owner. Large Scale Scrum calls it an area product owner. I've even seen it called a product manager. So what happens here is that this person is in charge at the very top and they have a higher level product backlog. But at the team level, each team has their own product owner. Each team has their own product backlog. And what happens here is this whole group right here is working together to ensure the entire product line is being managed from a requirements, priorities, scope, product management standpoint. Now, each product owner is given a lot of autonomy in their own areas. But with that said, if the product owners ever disagree, question to the group, type your answer in the chat window. If the product owners ever disagree, who do you think always has final say if the product owners ever disagree? Who do you think always has final say? Type your answer in the chat window. If these team level product owners ever disagree, who do you think has final say? Type your answer in the chat window. Give you folks a second to think and register and respond to that. So the correct answer is if these product owners ever disagree at the team level, the super product owner, chief product owner up here always has final say. They're the ones that help break the ties, and they're the ones that have final say. They're kind of the buck stops here type person for the entire program line. But the beauty of that is if I'm a developer right here on team 1, I'm still looking to my specific product owner for my scope, my priorities, my requirements, so that we still have that focus at the team level, but then this whole group is ensuring that our projects is being coordinated. Now, this whole thing is architected and designed to deliver value as linearly as possible. So I really want to minimize dependencies and handoff. I want to follow this green line for value. What I'm trying to avoid is I'm trying to avoid this red line. I'm trying to avoid all these handoffs. Handoffs are expensive. Handoffs slow you down. Handoffs increase risk. You probably can't get rid of all your handoffs, but the more handoffs you have, the riskier your system is. So at 5 handoffs, that's a very slow, risky system. For example, if we think about a very old school traditional waterfall approach, we might have requirements team handing off to the design team, handing off to the development team, handing off to the test team, handing off to the release team. It's 5 handoffs. It's very expensive. Now, if we're building software and I let a CIO, CTO, architect type set up the organization, the danger is this: back-end team, middleware team, data team, front-end team, integration team. It's still 5 handoffs. That's what we call component tiering or architectural waterfall. It ends up being very expensive. If I use a very oversimplified example, think of Microsoft Office. What we want instead is Word team, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote, Outlook. That way we can deliver value a bit more linearly instead of all the handoffs. Right. Now, there's a lot of reasons why I want the green line instead of the red line, but I can show you one reason as a simple mathematical formula. There's a company called Digital AI. They have a website called State of the Agile Survey. On their website, they claim Agile teams have a 75% chance of success. Oh, Matthew has a question. So keep the C-suite from co-serving as a super product owner. So generally, it depends on kind of how your organization's set up, but generally you probably would not have someone in the C-suite as a super product owner, but what you might have is a super product owner reports to someone in the C-suite. So you generally wouldn't have the super product owner be someone in C-suite, depending on the size of your organization and kind of the levels. But what I've often seen is that the super product owner, the executive, the C-suite executive, maybe more like a product champion, product sponsor, in answer to Matt's question in the chat, which is, so keep the C-suite from serving as a SPO. Yeah, they're usually a little above usually. Yeah. But back to the handoffs here. So if we have 75% success, so Digital AI claims that Agile teams have a 75% probability of success at the team level. Those are really good odds. In fact, question to the group: is anyone here a gambler? Anyone here ever been to a casino? Casinos are fun. Yeah. So let me ask you folks a question. If you were to go to a casino and you found a table game that would pay you out 75% of the time, question to the group: what would you do? If you went to a casino and you found a game that would pay you out 75% of the time, what would you do? I like your answer, Brandon. Brandon says he would play and then just simply retire. But that's the correct answer, Brandon, because, well, first of all, here's the problem you're going to have, Brandon. The problem you're going to have, Brandon, is the moment that that people in casino realize we had a game that paid out 75% of the time, you're going to have to fight through a sea of people to get a spot at the table. But once you do, you're never leaving. This is where you live now. I'm going to retire in this chair, because what happens is 75% mathematically means that out of every 4 hands I play, I win 3 of them, right? It's phenomenal, but it's also a completely ridiculous conversation, because no casino is ever going to do that. You're never going to see anywhere close to these odds at a casino. But with that said, here's what's interesting mathematically. If I use 75% as a base probability, what are the chances? Anyone know how to calculate the formula to identify the probability of all 5 teams succeeding together, which is what I would need in the red line? If I have 75% as a base probability, does anyone know how to calculate the formula? Does anyone know how the formula to calculate the probability of all 5 teams succeeding together, which is what I would need for the red line? Does anyone know what that formula is? Any other math? Oh, there you go. Very nice, Amanda. So Amanda is correct. What you do is you take the 0.75 and you multiply it by the number of handoffs is correct. Nice. So it's 0.75 times 0.75 times 0.75 times 0.75 times 0.75. It's 0.75 to the 5th power. If you're actually going to do the math, that number is 23.7%. When I said dependencies slow you down, increase risk, you can see as a simple mathematical model what I'm talking about. With 5 levels of handoff, you're not guaranteed failure. It's not that success isn't possible, but the mathematical realities of your situation is that failure is much closer on the horizon. Your success probabilities are further diminished. Now, I have good news and bad news about this. And the bad news is if I add more handoffs, that number gets so much worse. If I had a 6 handoff, we're talking about where our probability of success is in the teens. With another handoff, we're closer to single digits. But if I start removing handoffs, with just 3 teams involved, with just 2 handoffs across 3 teams, you're getting closer to 40%. Right? With I'm sorry, I said it wrong. With 4 teams and 3 handoffs, you're getting closer to 40%. With 3 handoffs, with 3 teams and 2 handoffs, you're closer to 50%. With 2 teams and 1 handoff, it's closer to 60%. And with no handoffs, you're at 75%. So what I recommend for your teams that have to work together is over time, you want to reduce and remove as many dependencies as possible. You probably can't get rid of all of them, but over time, I recommend you get closer to the green line and further remove from that red line. Yeah. Any questions so far? So one of the questions that was brought up earlier is when we have multiple teams working together, how do we create consistency across the teams? How do we share learnings? How do we create standards? How do we do it so that if team 1 creates something, we're not reinventing the wheel, we can easily share it across all the other teams? And also, USA Staffing, for example, that's one product. So I can't be in this part of the system and then this part of the system and then a different part of the system and have it look like a series of disjointed experiences. How did I create consistency in my look and feel, in my messaging, in the usage? Probably the best answer I've seen to that is a concept called communities of practice. So I'll give you an example. I used to be a Scrum Master at the Motley Fool. Fool.com is the website. I'll put that in the chat. So I used to be a Scrum Master at the Motley Fool. Fool.com is website. They're a financial advising website. I bring them up because they are easily, by far and away, the best Agile shop I've ever worked at. They do Agile top-down throughout the entire organization at a very, very high level. It was great. I really enjoyed it there. But when I was at the Motley Fool, we had different communities of practice. So for example, we had a UI UX design community of practice. We had a software engineering community of practice. And I, as a Scrum Master, I was part of our Agile and Scrum community of practice. So what we did at community of practice is we brought in speakers from the outside world to share industry best practices. We also shared internally and helped each other with problems. And we set and maintained standards. So for example, when I was at the Motley Fool, the UI UX community of practice, them along with marketing, they own the color schemes, and they created the Motley Fool common grid system, which is a grid system all the teams had to use so that we could reshare artifacts across different teams. The software engineering community of practice, they owned the coding standards and naming conventions. And I, as a Scrum Master, I was part of the Agile community of practice. And in the Agile community of practice, what we did there is we had, one of the things we did is we had Scrum norms, which are Scrum practices. We wanted Agile norms, which were Agile practices, wanted all the Scrum teams and the Kanban teams to do. But we thought it was also important to allow the teams to optimize locally. So we also allowed for Agile pilots. And the concept was we periodically review all the pilots. Some pilots are great ideas. We promote to new norms. Some pilots are great ideas, but we didn't really want to mandate for everyone. And so we would say, hey, here's a practice area that we think is very good. You're allowed, if you want, you can optionally adopt it if you like, but you don't have to. And then some pilots, we realized weren't really the way we want to do things in the organization. And we'd ask those teams to say, hey, that's not really aligned to how we want to do Agile in the organization. Please kind of make some updates to that practice. We'd also periodically review all the norms because some norms have outlived their usefulness. Some norms we would tweak and adjust and optimize over time. So communities of practice to share consistency, standards, and learnings. Also, once a week, members from each teams send representatives to our weekly Scrum of Scrums. Actually, before I get into that, I see a question from the chat window from Matthew here. What type of development projects do they have? So the Motley Fool is a financial advising website. My team was Fool.com, the website. So our job was the main website, Fool.com. But then there's a lot of infrastructure, because my team also built out the content management system, but also we had a lot of financial advising packages, financial advising newsletters. And so a lot of Scrum teams help support that. And the Motley Fool has actually operates their own mutual funds, and some teams provide infrastructure around that as well. So that's typically the type of software development we did there at the Motley Fool. But they also use Agile and Scrum teams for a lot of the non-software stuff as well. Now, with that said, in this model here, once a week, we had our weekly Scrum of Scrums meeting. In the weekly Scrum of Scrums, each team sent representatives to our weekly Scrum of Scrums. And what we talked about in Scrum of Scrums was basically 5 things. This is the next slide, by the way. What we talked about in the weekly Scrum of Scrums is what does my team need from other teams? What do other teams need from my team? What is my team working on that may affect other teams? What are other teams working on that may affect my team? And anything else good to share. So once a week, we did our weekly Scrum of Scrums to make sure that we're managing the collisions and dependencies across all the teams. Also, before each release production, we had a pre-release meeting. Before each release production, in our pre-release meeting, we identified, let me take a step back. In the pre-release meeting, each team sent representatives to our pre-release meetings. And what we identified there is who's releasing what, who's going to be on call. We exchanged contact information and created distribution groups. We identified what our post-release checklist was going to look like, what our pre-release checklist was going to look like. We also identified what we had to do if we had to roll back all the changes. We did that before each release. So this right here is about as lightweight as I can get as a good starting point. So what we have at the very top is a super product owner, chief product owner, area product owner, product manager, whatever you want to call it, that oversees the entire product with their own product backlog that's higher level. We have product owners at a team level that have a lot of autonomy in their own areas, but these folks are all working together to ensure the scope and the priorities and the product is being managed at the product level. We want to value streamline the teams to try to minimize and remove dependencies and handoffs as much as possible. We want to be closer to that 75% number, further away from this 23.7% number. Communities of practice to create consistency and share learnings across teams. Scrum of Scrums to manage our dependencies and collisions across teams. Pre-release meetings to manage our release efforts across teams. This is a great starting point. Now, on top of that, you may want to add other things. For example, our teams at USA Staffing, they would do the sprint planning every 2 weeks at the team level, but once a quarter, they would do quarterly planning at a higher level to ensure that all the teams were aligned for the next 3 months. Retrospectives happened every 2 weeks at the team level, but once every other month, all the team representatives from each team got together for an integrated retrospective across all the teams to identify how our teams can work better together across all 5 teams. The sprint reviews every 2 weeks were at the team level, but then once every month, we integrated all the teams together and did a bi-monthly review with all the teams integrated together every other month. So if there's other elements you want to add, like integrated planning, integrated reviews, integrated retros on top of this, that's great as well. I think doing something like this starting out is a great way to get your team started in terms of scaling together. And once you get to a good point with this, at that point, you have a higher maturity level as a group, as an organization. And at that point, you might be ready for one of these more formal practices like a SAFe or a LESS or a DAD, for example. Any questions around these concepts so far? All right, let me talk about something I've seen quite a bit in the industry. Anyone here have people spread across multiple teams? Anyone here have team members where, maybe they're on my team? Amanda, walk me through that. Do you have some team members where it's like we're supposed to share maybe 50-50, for example? Walk me through how that works from what you've seen, Amanda.
Well, it's certainly challenging, especially when there are multiple things perceived as high priorities across teams. I think what's challenging for me as a project manager is that when I'm not on the other projects, it's harder to help set priorities for those people. But I think what my organization has done well is they've let it be known that you can reach out to seek clarity on priorities when you are contributing to multiple teams to help prevent confusion.
Yeah, it's a very good point. In fact, the problems you highlight here's what they promise you. They always promise you something like this, right? Let's say Amanda, you're a team member. and you're 50% of my team and 50% another team. So they always promise 50-50, right? And so when it comes to like resource, like capacity planning and resource allocation, I'm going to assume that I have you 50-50. But the problem is it's never 50-50. Sometimes it's 70-30. Sometimes it's 60-40. Sometimes it's 90-10. Sometimes it's 90-90 where you're just working day and night because you're overcommitted across both teams, right? And if you're a really slick worker, sometimes it's 20-20 because if you're really kind of dishonest with your intentions, you tell team one, I can't do anything for you because I'm working for team two. You tell team two, I can't do anything for you because I'm working for team one. And now I found a way to play golf all day on Friday. So it gets a little tricky in many different areas. So we recommend actually moving away from that. So first you have to understand why people do it. So why do we have people spread across multiple teams? So here's the concept. Amanda, you look sharp. Why don't you work 33% here, 33% here, 33% here? William, why don't you go 50% with Amanda here and 50% here? Bill, I need you for 33%, 33%, 33%. Wayne, 33%, 33%. Marissa, help out Wayne over here and then work on your own team. And the danger is we take all our people and we try to federate them out across multiple projects. And by doing this, what it allows us to do is it allows us to cover a lot at once, right? Because by taking all my people and spreading them out across all my efforts, let's say, for example, right, I have a limited number of people. And so I can take my limited number of people and spread it across all these efforts. So for example, let's say I have 70 efforts. And by doing this, I can maybe start 65 of these 70 different things going on. Right? So that's why we do this, because we can get a lot of things going at once. Right? It creates that. Well, here's the thing. In this model here, if we can start, if out of the 70 items, I can start 65 of these at once, question to the group, type your answer in the chat window. Who's going to love that concept? Who's going to love the concept that out of all 70 of these items, I can start 65 of these at once? Who's going to love that concept? Who's going to love that idea? Hey, you have 70 projects you can start. Yeah, you know who's going to love it is your stakeholders and the C-suite. Because here's what's going to happen. Your stakeholders are going to love this because they're going to tell your leadership. They're going to say, hey, leadership, you know, you're doing an awesome job. You know, we appreciate that you only have a very limited number of people. You have a very limited amount of money. But out of our 70 projects, you're able to start 65 at once. That's fantastic. Kudos to you. I appreciate you doing more with less. Who's heard that before? Who's heard that before? I need you to do more with less, right? So I appreciate you doing more with less. But here's a problem. What this gives you, it gives you the illusion of progress. You have the illusion of progress because what happens here is if I start out of all these projects, if I start 65 of these at once, the danger is nothing gets done, right? By saying yes to everyone, the essence is we're saying no to everyone. In fact, to quote a great movie from The Incredibles, what the villain said is if everyone's special, no one's special. The danger here is nothing gets done and it's very slow and we're just context switching all the time. So like I mentioned earlier, I spent many years as an employee at the NASDAQ stock market. And when I was there, we grew a lot. I was there from mid-late 90s to the mid-2000s. We went from a smaller market to a smaller private nonprofit entity to a for-profit entity to a publicly traded company while I was there. And that all relied on our technology platforms. And one of the things that really helped us get there is we moved away from this matrix team model into, well, here's what we discovered. We discovered that it was very tricky splitting people across efforts. What worked out really well is having our folks work together as a team. And then what we have at the team level is someone to manage the incoming inventory. So this was kind of before we knew Scrum very formally, but similar to a product owner. And they would manage all the needs. And so what would happen is you would take, for example, this group here and flow all their needs into team one. This group here flow all their needs into team two. This group here flow all their needs into team three. And the product owner then prioritize these and the team can focus on delivery. Right? And so what happens here is instead of, here's the biggest difference here. The biggest difference is instead of starting 70 items at once, maybe we're going to start, instead of starting as many items as we can, we're going to start as little as we can because the goal of work isn't to actually start things. The goal of work is to finish things. And so let's say, for example, instead of starting 70 items, we start 6 items, but we get those done and do the next set and the next set and the next set. When I was at the NASDAQ stock market, we went from this to this, and we see a massive increase in our technology delivery capabilities with that change. Any questions about this concept so far?
How do you get people to buy into that?
Oh, well, basically, we ran some experiments to show that it was faster. So what we did at NASDAQ is we started at a smaller scale. At NASDAQ, we started with some of the websites first. And what we saw was the throughput when we went from this to the matrix management model was night and day. And so once we saw the test from the experiment from the test, it really incentivized them to go forward with it. And remember, NASDAQ became popular because prior to NASDAQ, New York Stock Exchange, the way they work is you have people on the floor passing pieces of paper back and forth to do trades, which is crazy when you think about it now. NASDAQ was the first big national market that really used our technology platform to automatically match trades instead of having people pass the trades back and forth. So we needed this to really massively build out our platforms to be able to do that. No, I kind of got on a tangent there. That help with the original question, Amanda? Or
Yes,
whoever asked it?
thank you.
Great, you're welcome. Now, so delivery value makes a lot of sense. However, question to the group, who's not necessarily going to love this idea? Who's not necessarily going to love this idea? And I'll give you a hint, your answer is going to be very similar to the answer to the question I asked a minute ago. Yeah, they're managers to some extent, yes, but you know who's really not going to love this idea? Is these people up here, the stakeholders. Because here's the problem you're going to have. Now they're going to start complaining. They're going to go to leadership and say, hey, leadership, look, what is your deal? That old director of IT, out of all 70 of our projects, he started 65 at once. That was great. New director of IT, out of all 70 of our projects, we're only starting 6 of them. We're never going to finish everything at this rate, which is a very valid statement. We're not supposed to finish everything at this rate. Once again, this is kind of one of the biggest obstacles you have to kind of deal with is understanding that, look, it's not about starting a bunch of things at once. It's about taking the resources, people, and teams and money we have and maximizing the value we deliver. Once again, what the focus should be is delivery value over the illusion of progress. And so what happens here is we identify out of this whole set what's most valuable, we deliver that first. And then what's next most valuable, we deliver that next. So always delivering based on value to the organization and value to the users. Now, what the problem is going to be is, let's say I'm the stakeholder right here in this third grouping, and I'm very low in the priority list. I would be very frustrated because I'm very low in the priority list. But the beauty of this model is if I want to be moved up higher, I just have to explain why my project is so valuable. And if the project is very valuable, that justifies us moving it higher. But if it's not as valuable, it's just going to have to wait. Yeah. So this concept is what we did at NASDAQ, and we saw massive gains from that. Right? The other thing we saw from that is, you folks heard of the Tuckman model? Anyone familiar with Tuckman? So once you see this picture, a lot of you probably have seen this before. So Tuckman model is that team learning curve, that forming, storming, norming, performing, and the advanced version of the model, there's the hyper-performing and adjourning. So it's a team learning curve. And what we found is when you're always putting things together, splitting them apart, putting things together, splitting them apart, you're absorbing this team learning curve every time. But what we love to do is we love to have these people work together over the course of time, because then, the team starts off and they're kind of figure out how to work together. Then there's a bit of conflict, a bit of butting of heads, but then we start learning, okay, this is what you're about, this is what I'm about. Now we're going to make this work. And then we're like, oh yeah, now we're like really strumming along, really delivering in that performing range. Once you're performing, don't break the teams up, keep them together. Right. And so this works really well over time. Actually, I'll circle back on that in the second part of this module. Right? But there is one big downside to this model, is that let's say the first 10 things on team 1 are way more important than the first thing on team 2. But the danger is now team 1 and team 2 are delivering at the same rate. And so one of the things we found helpful to help prioritize that is we create some kind of portfolio management layer in between. So then all the stakeholders up here go into portfolio management layer, and then that then gets spread out. So let's say the 3 highest priority items can be spread across these 3 teams. This helps us ensure that our teams are always delivering on the highest priority capabilities, features, requests, products, and such. Yeah. Yeah, but with that said, this picture has some potential risks and downsides. Can anyone off the top spot a potential risk and downside to this picture? With the portfolio management layer in between, spreading out the work across 3 different teams. Anyone catching any of the potential risks and dangers yet of this picture, this model right here? Because there's a couple big ones. There's a couple big ones here. If not, here's the thought, right? Well, I'll say it first, and I'll show you the slide. So the 2 biggest issues is, one, the danger is with the added bureaucracy. Thank you, William. The added bureaucracy is right. The danger is, and I've seen this happen a lot, is that things get stuck at the portfolio management layer, right? The turnaround time, the decisions, the approvals take too long. Things get stuck there. And what I've seen happen is these teams down here are just finding busy work to keep them busy. That's not really that valuable as we're waiting for the portfolio management layer to release the valuable work. So if you do this, what you really need to do is have a portfolio management layer that can turn around their decisions very quickly. The other thing that you really have to recognize here is you have to, if you're going to do this, in this model here, I can kind of specialize the teams a bit more. So I can, if these type of people here do certain types of work, and the second group does a different type of work, and the third group does a different type of work, I can kind of create more specialized capabilities at the team level. But here, because we're supporting all these groups, then what that means is we'll likely have to have a spread of capabilities across all the teams, which can be a bit more challenging to do. So the pros and cons of each are the following. In the first model, we're mapping initiatives directly to the teams. It's effective, simple, potentially less dependencies. But the con is I'm potentially working on lower value pieces. Whereas if I have the portfolio management layer, the pro is we're always delivering highest value. The cons we just talked about, longer wait times, potentially more dependencies. Yeah. Any questions so far? One last note I want to add is when we do either one of these models, if we have stable state teams, for example, when I was at the Motley Fool, I was there for 3 years on the same team. I was Scrum Master on the same team for 3 years. And so what happened there is what I discovered during that time is once we're in the performing part of this picture, if a few members leave and a few members go, it doesn't really affect performance that much. So what I've seen is as long as you don't gain or lose about a third of your team, if a few members go and leave, it doesn't affect performance that much. So what we discovered at the Motley Fool is that sometimes people get bored, right? And people will say something like, hey, I've been on this team for 2 years. I want to try something different. So what we encouraged at the Motley Fool was rotations across different teams, which ended up being brilliant because what that created was what we call the Silicon Valley effect. And so Silicon Valley effect was based on kind of back in the heyday of startups back like in the 90s to 2000s. It was considered rude to complain about your job. And so instead of complaining about your job, you would simply leave because as a developer, there's lots of jobs everywhere. But the great thing about that is people from Google went to Microsoft, people from Microsoft went to Apple, people from Apple went to Google, for example. And what we saw there is a rapid growth in everyone's capabilities because they're kind of sharing stuff with each other. So when we were at the Motley Fool and we encouraged rotations, we saw that. So let's say, for example, I had a former developer, left my team, went to a different team. Well, we're still hanging out and friends. We still do team lunches all the time. So we still invite our former developers to our team lunches. And so they'll come team lunch with us and they'll say something like, hey, now that I'm on a new team, the way you're doing test automation, my old team does it way more effectively. When we get back, can I spend like an hour sitting down with one of you? Because I can show you some of the patterns we do that you can incorporate super easy. And it's going to help you right away. And when they get to a new team, they might say something like, why are you doing your peer reviews like this? That's so slow. We've really streamlined it by doing it like this. Let me show you how we do it on my old team. And so when you have those rotations, it really helps take the best practices and spreads across all the teams very quickly as well. So having the stable state teams with those rotations allows to optimize and then allows to push each other to help us all get better over time. So these were some of the high-level concepts I wanted to share. But with some scaling thoughts I want to leave you with is focus on delivery of value. Mapping priority to teams instead of spreading your team members out. We like value-driven teams and reduce dependencies over time. There's a great mantra in Lean, which is think big, but act small. We want to think at the large level, but execute at a more precise level. With that said, I think that's all I have. So I'm going to leave you real quick with my information once again, in case you lost it from earlier or weren't in initially. So here's all my contact information once again in the chat. And we still have about a bit of time left. And so what I'll do is, as I put the information in chat, I'll open it up to the group with any questions or thoughts I can help with. Any questions or thoughts? All right. If not, I gave you back 16 minutes of all your lives. Thank you for having me on. I'll pass it over to Matthew for any closing announcements.
Yep. On behalf of the chapter, Mr. Cheng, greatly appreciate your time. I think this is enlightening and pulled on a lot of threads that we as project managers are dealing with real time, day to day. We're happy to announce Agility Prime Solutions as one of our chapter endorsed training partners. So as you think of sending your staff or teams or yourselves, if you're an entrepreneur, to Scrum, Agile training, Agility Prime Solutions will be our core recommendation going forward.
Oh,
So
yeah. One quick note. With the training, we do it virtually, regularly, very often, but also do it in person. Right now, we're doing it in person in Herndon, Virginia, which might be a bit of a drive for some of you Montgomery County folks. But if some of you like to learn better in person, every month, no, once or twice a month, we have CSM and CSPO classes in Herndon, Virginia in person as well. My apologies for interrupting, Matt. Keep going.
Oh, yeah. Great. So, yeah, between virtual and in person, I think Agility has a lot of great offerings. We know you're going overseas next month for more of the speaking tour to enlighten project managers across the world, just like you did for us. So good luck with that. Thank you so much for donating your time and expertise today, and looking forward to working with you going forward. And for all our attendees today, both live and on demand, thank you for being members. Thank you for being lifelong learners, and have a great weekend.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Thank you, everyone. And don't forget, go to my aunt's restaurant, Taipei Tokyo Cafe. Shameless plug for my aunt. Thanks, everyone. I appreciated all your time. All right. Well, thanks for having me